Hello, this is Mr. Henry. Welcome to lesson 6.3, solving proportions using cross product. Now, I know in the last lesson we started talking about cross multiplying. This is the official lesson. So the essential question here today is, how do I solve proportion using cross multiply? And it's pretty easy. Again, we saw it last lesson. Vocabulary, now that we actually have cross product as a vocabulary word, really all it is just another method for solving a proportion. There we go. So it's a method for solving a proportion. Okay. So since we already have some background on this, I'm not going to go too terribly slow. Let's look at example 1. It says here, a car can go 600 yards in 12 seconds. How long will it take to go 825 yards? Well, one cool thing about proportions is every problem is almost set up the same. You get the first sentence, which usually has everything you need for the first part of your proportion. So here I see 600 yards in 12 seconds. Now notice I put my units in here. You need to have units because that's how you know where your pieces go in the second ratio. Yards, yards. Seconds, seconds. Okay, now that all came from the first sentence. Let's read the second sentence. How long will it take to go 825 yards? 825 yards. Now we have our proportion. This would be our variable, the missing piece. We would cross multiply. 600 times x would be 600x. 12 times 825 gives us 12 times 825. I'm punching in on my calculator. Equals 9,900. And then we saw yesterday to solve this, we're going to divide both sides by 600, and x equals 16.5, and the unit on x was seconds. 16.5 seconds. That is it. You set up your proportion, you cross multiply, you solve. Okay? Now letter B, I'm going to read the problem, but I'm only going to write down the important parts. It says a bowler can score 220 points in 3 games. How many games would it take to score 512 points? I'll read it one more time. A bowler can score 220 points in 3 games. How many games would it take to score 512 points? So, I want you to set up that proportion, cross multiply, solve it, hit play when you're ready to continue. Okay, let's see how we did. First sentence gives you everything you need for the first part. So 220 points in 3 games. Notice the units include your units. Points, games. How many games would it take to bowl 512 points? 512 points. This would be your variable. How many games? X games. Cross multiply, solve it. Cross multiply here gives you 220x. 3 times 512 gives you 1536. You divide both sides by 220, and x equals 6.98, and there's a bunch of other decimals, but that is enough. games. So almost 7 games, 6.98 games to score 512 points. And we got that using a proportion. Now, example B, more practice. It's just the same stuff. It says here, if a man on Earth weighs 105 pounds, on the moon he would only weigh 17.5 pounds. Okay, without even reading the rest of it, I'm going to write down part by proportion. 105 pounds, 17.5 pounds. Okay. How much would a 1,000-pound car weigh on the moon? If that 1,000-pound car weighs that much on Earth, how much does it weigh on the moon? Well, let's see. Pounds. And, 1,000 pounds. I've got pounds and pounds. How do I know which of these to use? Well, let's be a little bit more specific. This 105 pounds is 105 pounds on Earth. So I'll put it Earth. And it's 17.5 pounds on the moon. That was a 1,000-pound car on Earth. How much did it weigh on the moon? So the 1,000 goes here, variable, cross multiply, solve. Take a second or two and cross multiply and solve before I do it. I'll give you about 5 seconds. Okay, 105x equals 17500. 2, 3. Yep. Divide both sides by 105, and x equals 166.6 pounds on the moon. So this 1,000-pound car on Earth only weighs 166 pounds on the moon. Okay? Last example, you've seen a bunch of these. These are similar triangles. Here we have a telephone pole, and here we have a little stick figure. And I'm going to give you some lengths. I'm going to tell you the stick man is 6 feet tall. We don't know how tall that is. We do know, though, that the stick figure's shadow is 4 feet long, and that the shadow here is 10 feet long. And we can set up a proportion just like we did up above. So remember these because I'm going to have to write off to the side here, or have it written down. So I'm going to set up a proportion. X over 10, X over 10, my first ratio comes from my first figure. X over 10 equals, well, 6 over 4. It has to be matching up. X over 10, 6 over 4. Cross multiply, solve. Here I get a 4x. There I get a 60. Divide by 4, divide by 4. I can do that in my head. You get 15 feet tall. Okay? So cross multiply should be old stuff by now. We know how to do it. That's pretty easy. You set it up, making sure your units match up going across. Yards, yards, seconds, seconds. If your units always happen to be the same, you have to be more specific. Here's 105 pounds on Earth, 17.5 pounds on the moon. Be more specific, but they still have to match up going across. If you would have similar figures, such as these, when you set up your proportion, you make sure that you have corresponding sides matching up. X, 6, X, 6, 10, 4, 10, 4. And then you just simply cross multiply. Again, you multiply the diagonals, and then solve your one-step equation by dividing by the number next to the variable. And that is it. That's it for lesson 6.3. I'll see you in the next lesson.